I would point out before we start that we have thoroughly catted this area. So this rig just runs off a small jenny. We do claim that this is a quiet process. As you can tell, it's not that quiet. Now the tube there that Gary's just fitting onto the KR20 is a stabilising arm. And normally you would have a second guy on the end of that to stop the rig kicking round while it's screwing or unscrewing the ground screw. And off we go. This is a KSF 90 ground screw, which effectively means that the top of it is 90mm diameter approximately, and that is suitable for using a 76mm post or a 60mm one, although we're not doing many of those these days. For tubular posts that are any bigger than that, we can go up to 114mm, but you would be needing the larger ground screw over the back there, which is a KSF 140, which has a top shank of 140mm diameter. And believe it or not, we do get customers who have had the ground screws put in and then change their mind and decide they'd like it put somewhere else. Even just a few, less than a metre sometimes, but it's good just to be able to turn up, unscrew it and put it back in again. So taking it out is as simple as that. And then if that were a permanent reinstatement, obviously we would backfill that with a suitable material. And effectively we have the same process, but in reverse. Whatever did we used to do before the magnetic spirit level? So they will check that as it goes in to make sure that it's remaining plumb all the way down. And I'd have to admit they're not always ending up plumb. It's very rare that they don't get it right, but obviously if it doesn't go quite right, you can just take it out and do it again. Sometimes you might get a minor obstacle underground, like a stone or something like that, which will make it kick slightly out of true, but and it's not unheard of to have to take it out and drop it back in again. The Groundscrew is a German product, and of course we know the Germans are very good at complicated technology. This is possibly one of the simplest products I would think that's ever come out of Germany. It doesn't have to be grass, by the way. We can do this in footways. Jenny wasn't quite right when she said we can put it in through block paving. We do have to take the blocks out to be able to do it, but once you get to the substrate you can put it in exactly the same way. We've done a lot in Warrington where effectively they've been screwed into the footway, and the top flange of the ground screw just ends up flush with the ground, and you can fit the pole in exactly the same way as you can do in these type of surroundings. If we hit rock, we will probably try and relocate to a position where there is no rock. I would admit we do sometimes admit defeat, and then we revert to a conventional type of base. So your ground screw's in, and it's fixed in place into the ground screw with an angular grit, which basically is designed to bind together and it doesn't drop out at the bottom. So it is a question then of making sure that the post remains plumb. You drop the grit in, and that can be rammed down the side of the post and it is surprisingly solid. Do you want to give that a quick waggle, Steve? Ground screws that size to support lattice masts, and we have had a version. There are some examples over in the corner there if you want to have a look at the various products with a lattice type, which will take the place of the usual cradle that would be concreted in for a lattice mast. We're now looking at having a two-part product, because unfortunately the ground screw with the plate already welded on doesn't work with the KR55 because the motor is so close to the boom. So we're developing an adapter which will go into the top of the ground screw after it's been put into the ground to support the lattice. Up to now we've used a HIAB with a torque motor to put the larger screws in, but we think this machine will be very much more efficient. Thanks, Barney. This is a different type of ground screw to suit the hinged posts, simply because this has an additional element, which is a collar which fixes into the top of the ground screw to secure the post. So firstly we're going to take this one out and put it back in again. This ground screw is longer than the other one. These come in at 1200mm or 1250mm. I think this is a 1250mm screw. Generally we would argue, going back to the previous question about rock or anything like that, we have a pretty robust method statement in relation to underground utilities, for instance, and obviously there isn't much point digging a trial hole down to 1250mm just to put a screw in. So we tend to take a more pragmatic view in those instances, and if we're going to dig to find out where the cable is, we'll probably decide to turn the trial hole into a foundation, unless our customer is absolutely insistent on having the ground screw. These days what we're saying in relation to utilities is that if there are any high voltage cables, gas or water shown on the drawings, we're generally not using ground screw. If there is power or comms there and we know where it is, or if there's nothing on the drawings and we're not detecting anything, then we are good to go with ground screw. So we're absolutely minimising any risk. In other words, we have to be 100% certain that there's nothing under there before we use it. We have clients now that, particularly on the HA network, who will do a lot of investigation before they get us in. especially if they think there's an issue with utilities. You know, they're using ground radar and all sorts to do that.
I'm from an urban authority, and that's everything we do.
Yeah. It's going to go that way, I think. You know, and I had one job last year. Post cap? Probably not. Steve, have you got the top plate that came off the Groundscrew? Could I have that for a minute? Not bad.
Yeah.
So we've got the collar already fitted onto the bottom of the post. As you can see, the post doesn't go very far into the ground. In fact, 273 millimetres. So you could argue there's a bit of a saving on the price of your post. But it is surprising that how solid that is. When you think that an equivalent concrete base is probably going to be at least 600 mil deep. Bolt goes through, the bolt has a hole in it, so you can put another padlock in there. Of course, it is possible theoretically to undo the socket at the bottom and take